A new era for the Cleveland Browns begins. Let's all hope that this one is more successful than the last 100. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you are new here, then please do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. So the 2025 NFL season is officially in the books, officially in the rear view mirror. We are already, even though it's only been around 10 days, full steam ahead into the off season, into the 2026 season. It's the one thing that the NFL does well. I say the one thing, one of the few things that the NFL does well, and that's stay in the news cycle all year round, which is good for someone like me if you like talking about this stuff. Good for most NFL fans. We don't get too many periods of feeling too detached from the NFL and our favorite team, and obviously, you know, that 10-day period between the Super Bowl, that's when most NFL media, they'll jet off for their little break, well-deserved break in most cases, after a hard, long season. Most teams, that's kind of that one period, other than that period in between OTAs and training camp where you get that kind of mini break. Not really so much for the Browns, because obviously we've hired a new coach and we've been dealing with coaches' hirings, etc., etc. But it is one of the more quieter periods, shall we say, those 10 days. I thought I would take it upon myself to take a little mini break myself away from content, just get all the personal stuff that I've had going in the last month all sorted out before, as I said, full steam ahead with my off-season coverage. So, you know, just before I get into this video where I obviously want to talk about, you know, what's happened the last kind of week with the Browns. We've hired a defensive coordinator, obviously going to talk about that, made some other hirings, etc., and just kind of talk about, you know, as I said, as we go into this new era of Cleveland Browns football. But as I said, before I get into that, I just want to kind of give you guys an idea of the direction of this channel. If you're someone that only clicked on this video because you want to see a British guy talk about the new Browns defensive coordinator, just skip ahead 2 minutes and that will be there for you. Anyone that is interested in this channel going forward, I just thought I'd give you a quick update of, you know, as I said, took a little bit, the last month of the season, I wasn't able to produce as much content as I would like, just because some personal stuff that was going on in my life that everyone has to deal with, you know, in their lives. So, you know, and I hold myself to a fairly high standard. It might not seem like I do with some of these videos, but I really enjoyed doing this because I enjoyed doing this for other people. You know, if you aren't aware why I started this channel, it was quite hard for me to talk Browns. It was quite hard for me to kind of get that interaction with a Browns fan that didn't sound like they were just, you know, reading off of a Wikipedia page, shall we say. And I enjoy making this content for, you know, for Browns fans or any NFL fan. So as I said, wasn't quite able to produce the content that I would have liked over the last month of the season. I apologize for that. But, you know, as I said, I've taken this kind of last 10 days, got things sorted out, kind of had a little think about how I'm going to go forward with this channel, and I'm ready to kickstart the off season. You know, going to be producing a lot more content going this off season. I mean, last off season I was pretty good with the content as well, but as I said, going to be much better with the content than I was towards the last month or so of the season. You know, this channel will start producing, you know, multiple 3-4 videos a week at the height of the off season. So if you're interested in hearing this British guy talk about his love for the Browns, talk about his opinion on all of the Browns move, you know, that's how it's going to go. And if you're interested in that, then please hit that subscribe button and help out the algorithm gods here on YouTube. But as I said, just wanted to get that out of the way, give you guys an idea of, you know, just because of the videos have been a little bit not quite as much the last month, that doesn't mean that that's going to continue. You know, I will be ramping up the videos again from this point onwards as we go into the off season. And, you know, as I said, I like doing this. I would do this if no one listens. The fact that anyone listens is just a benefit. So I appreciate everyone that subscribes and you know, even clicks on any of these videos. But that's enough about me. I know if you're wondering, I've even had a haircut, so that's how much I've improved on myself in these last 10 days. But talking about improving on yourself, hopefully improving on yourself, the Browns obviously kickstart their new era in 2026. You know, for someone like me, I mean, Kevin Stefanski and that kind of coaching staff were a mainstay for the last, since 2020. The whole time I've been doing this channel, those guys have been in the building. This is the first time for my channel. This is the first time for the Twitter account that I have. That this not the first time as a Browns fan, but just the first time as my kind of internet Browns fandom, shall we say. Kind of, I don't know what I'm going with that, but you know what I mean. That we have a completely new coaching staff. We have a completely new era, as I said, for the Cleveland Browns, and that obviously starts at the top with Todd Monking. Obviously, I've done the videos on Todd Monking. I wasn't that bad with my videos, guys. I got those ones out, and you know, if you haven't heard my thoughts, go check that. Go check out those videos. You know, I was maybe more so having fun with it. I had a bit of an adverse reaction to the Todd Monking hiring, more so just out of the surprise of it. I mean, you know, it was kind of out of left field. But I think, and you know, as I said in the video I did on it, every passing day since then, I felt a lot better about the hire, and I'm kind of in this mode now where, you know, I'm actually glad they hired Todd Monken. I'm a big fan of him. Everything I've seen of him as a person, obviously it's yet to be seen how he is as a head coach, never being a head coach before, but I'm a big Todd Monken guy. All for Todd Monken. More of Monken is what I want, and you know, what he's done so far, I think, has been a good start in terms of the staff that he's brought in, etc., etc. And that obviously starts with the biggest one, which is the defensive coordinator. You know, we can talk about the offensive coordinator, of course I will, but you know, Todd Monken is going to be calling the plays. We know it's his offense, kind of as it was with Kevin Stefanski when he was here. So the offensive coordinator isn't quite, you know, as that high pedigree as maybe some other teams, whereas the defensive coordinator of this team with this talent, that is a big deal. And the Cleveland Browns have hired their defensive coordinator. I mean, I think a lot of us thought this would be an internal hire. I think people just assumed that that's the way they would go, with how obviously it all kind of transpired, and you know, they were a bit late to the game to get these DC candidates interviewed, etc. They cast an actual, you know, a much wider net than I think a lot of people expected with their interviews and, you know, talking to guys for this job. And I think they narrowed it down to Mike Ruttenberg, Corey Underlin from the Texans, and everyone's favourite linebacker coach, Jason Tarver, who, if I was going to go internal, you all know how, you know, anyone that's subscribed to this and seen more than one video of mine knows how much I love Tarvs. So of course would have loved that to be the case. But I do think that going external was probably the best thing to do, because I just think, you know, you could argue that an internal hire is a little bit lazy. Are you actually bringing anything new in, or are you just trying to run the same thing with someone less qualified to do so? So that's kind of, you know, as I said, as much as I would have loved Tarver and I'd have been so happy for him, I do think going the external route was the better thing to do. And obviously it came down to Mark Ruttenberg and Corey Underlin. I personally thought it would be Corey Underlin just because of the connections. They ended up going with is it Mark Ruttenberg or Rutenberg? Someone is going to have to correct me on that. I'm going to go with Rutenberg for now, because I feel like that's probably more likely. So Mike Rutenberg, he is, if you've seen a photo of him, you know, I think Jimmy Haslam clearly has a type with these with these pretty good-looking guys. Kevin Stefanski being one, Mike obviously being another one. He looks like a slightly younger, slightly more look-maxing, because I've learnt that word in the last. I involuntarily learnt that word, and that is our new defensive coordinator. So a lot of people Don't know too much about this guy, I'll be honest, myself included. This is a guy that's going to be a first-time defensive coordinator. So anyone that sits there and spends 20 minutes on this doing a video breaking stuff down, they're probably just lying. We can obviously look at the tape and stuff from him, his time at the Falcons, his time at the Jets, etc., etc. But in terms of talking about what he can actually do as a defensive coordinator, nobody has a clue because he's never done it before. And to me, that is some form of excitement because, as I've kind of said with my head coaching, kind of how I view head coaching hires, I always would rather, give it to a first-time head coach, someone that has not been given that chance before versus someone that we've seen being given the chance and not do very good at it. I mean, as much as I love Tarver, he wasn't a very good defensive coordinator when he was at the Raiders. So I'm always kind of in that boat with coaches. So that's always how I'm going to view things. So I do think that, it being a first-time DC, I would prefer that, unless it's obviously you're bringing in a very good qualified DC. But I'd rather bring in a first-time DC than someone that has done it before and didn't do it that well. And just to kind of give you a brief idea of it, when I say I don't know that much about him, I do know about him. Obviously spent last year with the Falcons, a Falcons defense that was pretty good. And, if anyone watched the Falcons last year, their biggest selling point, other than obviously Drake London and Bijan Robinson, was their defense, and especially that defensive line. They had the most sacks that they've ever had in franchise history last year. So that defense was pretty good. That's obviously his last stop. That's the most recent thing that we have to kind of take away from. And, as I said, it was a pretty good defense. This is a guy that comes from the Robert Saleh tree. He has been, dubbed a Robert Saleh protege, shall we say. And, it's pretty easy once you kind of learn all of that and you see his background, you see the kind of scheme that he comes from, it's pretty easy to see the appeal for the Browns with obviously Rutenberg coming from, a similar attack-focused, multiple front scheme that heavily utilizes the wide nine. That obviously, everyone was worried that with Jim Schwartz, leaving, were we able to bring someone in here that could run the wide nine? Even if someone had never ran wide nine, I'm sure they probably could have done it. But they did one even better, and they brought someone in that does have quite a lot of experience running that kind of same system. Saleh is a very attack-minded DC. That kind of one high, that one shell set, the whole two high safety stuff that took over the NFL the last few years, Schwartz wanted nothing to do with that. Robert Saleh wanted nothing to do with that. And I think Rutenberg is going to be similar. This is going to be a guy that is going to get creative in those blitz packages. He's going to be aggressive up front, kind of blanket it all with that kind of cover one shell safety back there. And get creative in the back end as well. I think that's what I'm excited about as well in terms of bringing in those wrinkles. And, Todd Monken wasn't lying. They will be running the same defensive scheme. As I said, this is a guy that has a lot of experience in a very, very similar attack style scheme that Schwartz has ran here, that what Saleh runs. They clearly hope that he can come in and, as I said, he can run that same scheme. He can, all of the talent on this defense that is kind of, centered around that scheme. That was obviously one of the biggest points of why you wanted to bring someone in that can do that. But they obviously, as I said, they're hoping that he can bring his own wrinkles to it. And, yes, we're going to see a lot of similar, defensive fronts and et cetera, et cetera. But I think, as I kind of touched on, I think what I'm excited about is a bit more creativity, a bit more creative blitz packages. I mean, Jim Schwartz, rarely blitzed. Obviously, if you can get pressure with 4, why do you need to? But there were some occasions where you wanted it to be called for, and he didn't get as creative as with some of these blitz packages as we've seen other defensive coordinators do. And that's something that I think that Rutenberg can bring here, and not just the defensive front, but I think how creative he can get in the back end as well. Jim Schwartz was essentially man up, play man defense, be active, not reactive. Dictate where you want the play to go, and I think that with Rutenberg, he can bring a bit more creativity in that back end. Maybe mix up, maybe not be entirely man. Maybe we can mix in some zone there. Maybe you play zone on one side, man on the other side. I think we're going to get a little bit more creative in the back end. So that's what I am looking forward to with Rutenberg, is that hopefully, obviously running this scheme at the same level it's been ran the last 3 years. Obviously, that's what a lot of people are going to judge it on, and that's what a lot of people are going to want. And of course, if he is able to do that, then great. But if he's then able to add his own wrinkles into it, get a little bit more creative with those blitz packages, get a little bit more creative in the back end, I think this defense can actually take a jump, which I think a lot of people might think was impossible with Jim Schwartz leaving. I don't think that's the case. I think that if you are able to, as I said, maintain that kind of same level that we've seen from this scheme, but also add those wrinkles from what Rutenberg has into that, I do believe that this defense can not just stay the same, but take a leap. And I expect the defensive staff to pretty much stay the same. We pretty much were told that even whoever they brought in, the hope was that most of that staff would stay the same. That seems to be the case. Even with Rutenberg being announced as the DC on Monday, we've not heard anything about Tarver pulling a childish response that Schwartz did when he got passed over for a job. I've not heard that Tarver went into the building and told everyone to fuck off. So I think he'll be staying, which is probably the best case scenario, because, as much as I love Tarvs, as I said earlier, I think external was the best case, and I think that also applies to Tarv in a sense of, if you make Tarv the defensive coordinator and he sucks, you have to fire him. Like, you can't go, all right, cool, back to linebackers, bro. Like, you have to fire him if that was the case. Whereas by not doing that, we can keep him as the best linebacker coach in the NFL, and he can stay with those linebackers and work his magic on those linebackers. So, not as I said, I love Tarv, but I'm not that mad about him not getting it. Mike Rutenberg, as I said, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I know loads about him. From what I do know, I've just said. I do think that, as I said, if he can bring this scheme up to the same level we've seen, but also add that bit more creativity, I don't think this defense will regress, and I think there's even a chance that this defense will take a leap. You've pretty much got all of that same staff anyway. It's not like you've changed the entire staff, and these guys have got to get used to new guys, etc., etc. It's pretty much just the defensive coordinator, one voice at the top changing, and hopefully changing for the best case. So I'm really interested to see how Mike Rutenberg can do. Of course, rooting for him. And excited to see what he can do with this defense. And then obviously, just quickly, because I'm not going to spend too long talking about a special teams coordinator or something, the Browns have actually filled out their staff as a whole. As I said, they were able to pretty much keep most of that defensive staff, even with Schwartz leaving, so you didn't have to do too much kind of turnover on that staff. Whereas obviously the offense, with Kevin Stefanski leaving, even taking Tommy Rees with him, obviously the Browns had to, essentially change the whole staff, and that's what they did. They brought in Travis Switzer as the offensive coordinator. He follows, obviously, Munkin from Baltimore, which, to be honest, most of this offensive coaching staff has, which I'm not mad at. I've seen some people get, oh, well, we're just bringing in the same staff from the Ravens. Well, yeah, that's staff that's worked. Todd Monken was quite successful in Baltimore, if people aren't aware. Lamar Jackson should have had 2 MVPs for the production that Monken was able to get out of him. And obviously, Derrick Henry, what he was able to do, what Mark Andrews was able to do, etc., etc. And Travis Switzer played a part of that. And if anything, when I obviously say Derrick Henry, that's the biggest part that he played in, because this is a guy who, his speciality is the run game. This is a former offensive lineman from Akron, of all places. So returning to Northeast Ohio for him, obviously that's cool for him. But this is a guy that does have a run first philosophy. He has a ground and pound philosophy. We saw that with what the Ravens did with Derrick Henry. Pair that with Monken's kind of vertical passing attack, and how he likes to get vertical, how he likes to get downfield. that's a really good pairing, in my opinion. You've got two guys, you've got Ying, you've got Yang, two guys that have proven to work together. As I said, Todd Monken is the offensive coordinator. It's his offense. He's going to be calling plays. So did it really matter who they brought in? I would rather he brought in someone that he already trusts, and that is clearly someone in Travis Switzer. So, I wouldn't spend all day talking about that one, but I do think that is a good mix between the two offensive coordinators, shall we say? And it's proven to work. And obviously, let's see what they can do in Cleveland. Talking about bringing the gang back together. George Warhop returns to Cleveland. Obviously, was here. Was it 2009 to 2014? I think 4 years, something like that. Obviously, again, following Monken from Baltimore, which, as I said, I don't think is a bad thing. That Baltimore offense was pretty good the last 3 years under Monken, so I don't think it's that bad. And a lot of people, when this was first announced, people were like, I'm not too sure about this one. Joe Thomas came out and said, nope, that's one of the best offensive line coaches ever. And everyone went, okay, cool, yeah, I'm happy about it now. But, this is a guy, it's an experienced guy. You can point to any offensive line coach and say, well, this year his offensive line gave up 50 sacks. I mean, Bill Callahan's offensive line the last 2 years was top 5 in sacks given up. Does that make him a bad offensive line coach? I don't think so. I'm interested to see what he can do. He has a massive job ahead of him, of course. I've been talking about it for the last, 4 years, how much this O-line needs overhauled. They finally left it a bit too late, shall we say, to the point where the entire O-line is going to be getting overhauled. So, big job ahead of George Warhop, but hopefully he can kind of, hopefully start with maybe bringing over one of those Ravens offensive linemen in Tyler Linderbaum, and we can get this Browns offensive line at least functionable, because that's the one thing we've not seen the last 2 years. It's been, in my opinion, the biggest crux of this defense has been the fact that we've not had an NFL offensive line out there. We have literally had traffic cones out there. So just getting this even to league average is going to be a massive benefit for this offense, and hopefully that's something that someone with the experience of George Warhop and obviously the kind of synergy that he already has with Todd Monken, that is something that they're able to do. We did get a special teams coordinator hired as well. I'm going to be completely honest here. This is Byron Storer, who was the assistant special teams coordinator for one of the worst special teams in the NFL last year. So not that much of an upgrade, but an upgrade still. I mean, he's going from the 31st ranked special teams to the 32nd ranked special teams. So slight improvement. But at the end of the day, I can joke, etc., etc. But he was the assistant, so I will give him the benefit of the doubt that he wasn't the sole reason that the Green Bay special teams were that bad last year as they were. I say 31st, they might have been 30th, because I think the Rams were 31st, who obviously hired Bubba Ventrone for some reason, thankfully. So yeah, don't get me wrong, on a face value, this you can go, well, we brought in the assistant from one of the worst special teams in the NFL to be the special team coordinator for the worst special teams in the NFL. How is that going to go? I don't really know. But as I said, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. It can't be much worse than Bubba Ventrone, I don't think. I'm not sure how you can get worse of non-existent coverage units. So hopefully we see some improvement from these special teams. As I said, it's a guy who, he was the assistant. He wasn't the special teams coordinator. I'd feel a lot worse about this if he was the special teams coordinator. It's a younger guy. He's he was an assistant. He gets his first shot as the full-time coordinator, as the boss of the special teams. So let's see what he can do, and what he can bring to just literally one of the worst special teams, not just in the NFL the last couple of years. One of the worst special teams I've ever seen. They are that bad, and they have been that bad. So that's pretty much most of the coaching stuff. We've also got it on offense confirmed that Deuce Staley will be staying as well as the running back coach. So happy about that. Happy for Deuce. Player favourite. Everyone loves him. So, really happy that he can stay in the building, and he's happy to obviously work for Todd Monken's staff. So that's the staff hires, guys, as I said, that I just wanted to talk about. Obviously, the main one being the defensive coordinator in Mike Rutenberg. But one last thing I did want to just touch on, because as I said, it's been around 10 days since I've done a video. And we did get some kind of news on Joel Bitonio. So for those of you who don't know, Joel Bitonio had a date in his contract. His contract is up, but because of the way that the Browns add void years in these deals, you technically have to, cut the guy, etc., etc. And the date for Joel Bitonio's guarantees to be voided, which would have meant that, if he retired, the Browns would have still had to pay him that money, was originally set for the 16th of March, which was Monday. The date came and we didn't hear anything. We didn't hear about him retiring. We didn't hear about an extension. We didn't hear anything. So, my first assumption was, right, okay, maybe they're going to just eat all of the money that they owe him, and he'll, they're kind of just working on that retirement announcement. But then it was confirmed that they did push the date back. So they pushed the date for his guarantees to be voided to the 10th of March, which is, of course, when the league year starts. Which is a lot more of a normal date than obviously that weird 16th of February date that they originally had. So I don't really know. As I said, when it kind of came and passed and nothing happened, I kind of had an idea. Now that they've moved it, I generally don't know. So, your guess is as good as mine. Is Joel Bitonio going to retire? Are they going to extend? The cheapest way of dealing with this whole thing is keeping Joel Bitonio. It's that he doesn't retire. You're able to give him an extension, a 1-2 year extension, and you're essentially able to move the money around and the guarantees from the void year across, obviously, that extension, and you can kind of move that money around, pay less each year than you would be if he just retired. Is he going to just retire? I wouldn't blame him. I mean, this is... he's played for the Cleveland Browns his whole career. He's an absolute legend, but at what point does he stop and say, are we actually going to win anything anytime soon? He was a big Kevin Stefanski guy. Maybe he's, with Stefanski leaving, he thinks it's time to up. Or maybe he goes, new head coach, all of this stuff, looks at that schedule next year. Fuck it, one last dance. You never know. But as I said, I usually would have a pretty good guess on this, and I don't. I couldn't tell you right now if he's going to retire or be extended. Whatever happens, I will be grateful and appreciative of Joel Bitonio regardless. But that's all the kind of Browns news that has happened in the last week since I've done these videos. All of the stuff that I wanted to talk about. As I said at the start, I wasn't quite able to keep myself at the standard that I would like the last month of the season, just because of all the personal stuff going on in my life. That's nothing extra or different to anyone. We're all humans. We all have to deal with things like deaths, etc. Full steam ahead, ready for the off season, ready for Browns news, ready for all the Browns news, and I'll be here as always talking about it with you guys, for you guys. I put a post out on social media. I'll say the same thing here. I'm always happy, always looking to have people on to talk Browns. If that's you, if you know someone, you don't even have to have a YouTube channel. I like talking Browns with Browns fans. So that will be kind of where my content will be over this off season. If I'm not talking about obviously the actual news that we get on those days or whatever, it'll be me talking with other Browns fans just about the Browns and obviously all the moves and etc, etc. So that would do it for me, I suppose. I haven't ended one of these videos in over a week now, so I kind of forgot how I ended these videos. But as I said, let me know in the comments your guys' thoughts on all of this stuff. Let me know if you're ever interested in coming on the channel. If you know someone else with another channel and they need a random British guy to guest, give me a message and I'll be happy to do it as well. But that would do it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you do enjoy my content, then please drop this video a like. Hit that subscribe button. It's free, but it really, really helps out my channel. You can also check the links in the description to see where you can follow and interact with me on social media. As I always say, I'm trying to build a community of Cleveland Browns fans, and even if that means I only get to talk to one fan a day, I'm happy because I'm talking Browns football with the best fan base in the world. Thanks again for watching, guys. Have an amazing week. Enjoy this little bit of respite we get in between the mayhem that is the Cleveland Browns off-season. NFL off-season is crazy enough, but Cleveland Browns off-season is just another level. Enjoy it as much as you can, guys. Thank you so much again for watching. And most importantly, go Browns.